It was supposed to be a simple guest appearance, a young conservative voice on daytime TV. But what Karoline Leavitt uncovered behind the scenes wasn't just media bias, it was a trap, a secret recording, a voice America knows, a plan to humiliate her, not debate her. And when Karoline hit publish, everything changed. The truth came pouring out, not with shouting, but with cold, undeniable receipts. And in that moment, millions saw what had always been whispered. The media isn't just spinning the story, they're scripting it. If you've ever felt like your voice was dismissed, your values mocked, or your faith ridiculed, this story is for you. Because Karoline didn't just expose one show, she exposed a pattern. So stay with us, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment if you believe in free speech, fairness, and the right to be heard. This isn't just a story about a recording. It's about what happens when one woman refuses to play by their script and brings her own. It was just past dawn in Washington, D.C. when the email arrived. Karoline Leavitt sat in her modest office, the kind with old carpet that smelled faintly of strong coffee and dust from tired Capitol files. Her son was finally sleeping through the night, and for the first time since returning from maternity leave, she had a moment of silence. Outside her window, the city hummed to life, but Karoline's eyes were fixed on a subject line that read only one word: truth. There was no sender, no body text, just a file attachment labeled WHTV Backroom RAWs 0326.mp3. She hesitated, not out of fear, Karoline didn't rattle easily, but because she knew anything sent without a name in Washington was either nothing or everything. With one click, the silence in the room shattered. The voice was unmistakable, Whoopi Goldberg. We let her on for drama, not for a real conversation. The girl's a puppet. I say bait her. Let her explode. Makes better clips. That's how you handle someone like her. Karoline didn't breathe. The words weren't just cruel. They were premeditated. They weren't debating her beliefs. They were orchestrating her downfall. She played it again, then again. And on the third replay, her spine straightened. They set me up, she whispered, voice cracked with fury. And they're still doing it. The media had always framed Karoline as the outlier. Too young, too Christian, too tied to Trump, too unapologetic. But this wasn't an opinion piece. This was proof. It wasn't about disagreements anymore. It was about a system. She called Stephen, her senior aide. You need to hear something, right now. Within minutes, her office door opened. Stephen, older, cautious, still wore his military haircuts like a badge of honor. Karoline hit play, speaker turned up. Stephen froze halfway through. That's Whoopi. That's definitely her. Karoline's jaw clenched. And this is going public. He blinked. Are you sure? You know what this means. The blowback, the threats. She stood, straightened her blazer, glanced at her silver cross. They used the spotlight to corner me. Now I'm turning that same spotlight right back on them. 3 days earlier, Karoline had been invited to appear on The View. She hadn't wanted to go. You know what they do to conservatives, Stephen had warned, especially young ones, especially you. I know, she replied. That's exactly why I'm going. The morning she flew to New York, Karoline wore the same navy suit she had worn during her congressional race. It had seen rallies, funerals, prayer circles, and campaign stops in diners across New Hampshire. She didn't wear it because it made her look good. She wore it because it reminded her who she was fighting for. When she stepped onto the soundstage, the energy was cold, the lights were hot. But the warmth? Fake. Joy Behar leaned in with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. Whoopi barely looked at her during rehearsal. The producers spoke in hushed tones behind clipboards, whispering things they thought she couldn't hear. But she heard it all. Push her on climate. She fumbles on immigration. Let her talk into a trap. Karoline walked to her seat and placed her hands gently on the table, feeling the vibration of the microphones beneath her palms. She knew she was walking into a minefield, but she had come prepared. You okay? Stephen had texted minutes before showtime. She didn't answer. The red light blinked on, and the cameras began to roll. What happened during the episode wasn't explosive. There were no screaming matches, no viral meltdowns. Karoline spoke her views calmly, held her ground, repeated again and again that she believed in the Constitution, in individual liberty, in America's founding principles. But off camera, it was a different show entirely. During commercial breaks, she heard them laughing. Let her dig herself deeper. Watch her spin out. After the segment, one producer whispered to another, "She didn't break. That's annoying." Karoline had smiled politely, shook hands, walked out into the Manhattan rain. But now, with the recording in hand, she understood something deeper. They never wanted her to speak. They wanted her to crack. She sat down to write, not a rant, not a post, a statement. Calm, precise, devastating. Last week, I was invited onto The View. I expected disagreement. I expected challenge. What I did not expect was a premeditated plan to bait, provoke, and humiliate. This morning, I received an anonymous audio recording. The voice? Unmistakable. Whoopi Goldberg. I believe in transparency, so I'm releasing the full clip. You deserve to hear it for yourself. She attached the file, typed one more line, The View Unmasked, and hit post. Within 6 minutes, her notifications exploded. MAGA influencers reposted, veterans, moms, constitutional scholars, Bible study groups. The tape hit something raw. It wasn't just about The View. It was about being silenced. Older Americans remembered when television was trusted. Now they saw what lived behind the curtain, and they were furious. One commenter wrote, "I'm 67 years old. I've watched The View for 20 years. I never imagined this level of manipulation. Thank you, Karoline." Another, "This isn't journalism. This is entrapment. And we see it now." Karoline didn't reply. She didn't have to. Sometimes the truth just needs air. Back at ABC Studios, panic spread like wildfire. Whoopi had gone silent. Joy Behar was on vacation. The show's social media accounts didn't post for hours. Then came a statement. Recent audio circulating online has been taken out of context. The View remains committed to open, respectful dialogue. Karoline read it, chuckled softly. Out of context? She pulled up the file, played it again, then attached it to another post. For those curious about the context, here's the full segment. Judge for yourself. By nightfall, Just Cancel The View trended nationwide. But Karoline stayed quiet. Because sometimes the most powerful move isn't another word. It's the silence that follows the truth. The next morning, Karoline woke to over 7,000 unread notifications. But it wasn't the numbers that caught her breath. It was the tone. Some were furious, some grateful, many stunned. One message stood out, a direct message, no name, no profile photo, only 5 words. You haven't heard the worst. Attached to the message, a second audio file. Karoline stared at her screen, lips tight. Stephen, now sipping lukewarm coffee across from her, looked up. Another one? She nodded, clicked. The voice wasn't Whoopi this time, it was Joy Behar. Let her cry about being attacked. That's the game. Conservatives love to play the victim card. There was laughter in the background, a producer, maybe 2. Another voice chimed in, off mic but audible. Make sure Whoopi hits her with the climate change question early. That's when they trip. Karoline didn't flinch. She sat silently as the recording played, not even blinking. Stephen leaned forward. This isn't just a moment anymore. This is systemic. Karoline nodded. Then we treat it that way. The post went live at 7 p.m. sharp. No dramatics, no filters, just a caption. Context. Here's your full context. Yours, Xiao, The View Unmasked, Part 2. The second clip detonated like a cultural bomb. What had started as a he said, she said became a pattern of behavior. The internet didn't just react, it erupted. This isn't journalism, it's ambush. Karoline came with dignity, they came with a script. Now, I want to know how many other guests got the same treatment. Memes flooded timelines. One image, Karoline facing down The View hosts, captioned, "They brought her in to break her. She broke their script instead." Another showed Whoopi with her head in her hands. When the puppet cuts the strings. ABC's PR department issued a second statement. "We will not be commenting further at this time." But the damage was done. By midnight, Caroline's first and second videos had amassed a combined 14.7 million views. And then, the third message arrived, another anonymous source. This time, video. The title of the file said it all. View rehearsal. Pre-show. MTG. Chi. Clip 1. Move. Karoline clicked, and what she saw chilled her. A room. A long white table. Whoopi. Joy. A producer. Cue cards. Strategy notes. Highlighted quotes from her social media. One card read, "Push her on immigration. Gets flustered. Don't let her use freedom of speech. Talk over her." Karoline paused the video, closed her eyes. Stephen spoke first. "They printed out your Twitter. They studied you." Karoline nodded. "They didn't invite me to a conversation." Her voice was low, measured. "They prepped a demolition." She reopened the laptop, dragged the clip into a folder. Then she picked up her phone. Tweeted, "It was never just a coincidence. Part 3 drops tomorrow." No hashtags, no audio, just the threat of truth. That night, major outlets scrambled. CNN, Fox, The Hill, Newsmax, even Politico. Some tried to spin it. Karoline milks moment. Others leaned in. Leavitt exposes View hypocrisy. But every headline shared one fact. Karoline Leavitt now had the country watching. Inside ABC studios, crisis mode kicked in. Producers gathered behind locked doors. Assistants wiped old rehearsal files. Lawyers drafted statements. A meeting was called. No talent allowed, just legal, marketing, and the C-suite. Ideas floated. Suspend Whoopi temporarily. Pull the View off air for a week. Too late. The next morning, the New York Times broke the dam. Inside the View's manufactured controversies, former staff speak out. 4 ex-employees, all with similar stories. Guests who didn't align with the show's agenda were subtly set up to fail. It wasn't conversation, it was performance. Karoline didn't comment. She didn't need to. The tide was turning, and this time, she wasn't riding it. She was steering it. The next morning, Carolina walked into her home office, baby monitor in one hand, coffee in the other. She sat in front of her laptop and hit upload. Shouting, "The View Unmasked." Part 3, the rehearsal footage. The footage rolled like a political thriller. Whoopi sipping coffee, Joy smirking. A producer handing out cards. Let her talk, then pivot. Roll your eyes if she says patriotism. If she mentions Jesus, mention climate. And then the quote that broke the dam. She's here to take hits. Let's not make her look smarter than she is. Karoline didn't narrate, didn't explain. The video spoke for itself. Millions watched. Fox News ran it on loop. Podcasters called it the View of hypocrisy. Even center-left commentators admitted this is a bad look. A cease and desist letter from ABC arrived by 5 p.m. Karoline ignored it. Instead, she called a press conference. On the Capitol steps, wearing the same navy blazer and her silver cross. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted, Karoline stood tall. I walked into that studio expecting disagreement. What I walked into was a coordinated takedown. Gasps, silence, then applause. This isn't about me. It's about every young person who was ever told they were welcome, only to walk into a room wired to break them. She held up the printouts. Here's the playbook. They forgot one thing. I recorded the game. That night, Karoline went live. No makeup, no edits, just her voice. They didn't expect me to have evidence. They expected me to explode. Instead, I exposed. And the country listened. Seniors, mothers, veterans, college kids, even people who didn't vote for her party. Because this wasn't left or right. It was right and wrong. And Karoline Leavitt had just crossed the line into history. By sunrise the next day, America wasn't just watching, it was reacting. The Botedio, the View Unmasked hashtag wasn't a moment anymore. It was a movement. Across small-town diners and retirement community centers, across Facebook pages filled with old high school friends and veterans groups, Karoline's name had become more than political. It had become personal. In a living room in Kansas, an 82-year-old Vietnam vet named Harold clicked off the morning news and looked at his wife. They thought they could break that girl. She reminds me of the nurses who patched me up in '69. Steady hands, unbreakable. In a church basement in Mississippi, a group of widowed grandmothers paused their Wednesday prayer circle to watch Karoline's Capitol Steps speech on a phone propped up on a styrofoam coffee cup. "She's one of us," whispered Linda, 74, her hands shaking as she clasped them. "She doesn't yell. She just tells the truth." It wasn't just older Americans either. On college campuses, even some progressive students, those disillusioned with performative activism, began posting their own takes. "I don't agree with her politics," one student from NYU tweeted, "but setting people up on national TV isn't debate, it's theater," and she saw through it. ABC tried to regain control. They aired a new episode of The View, stripped down, heavily rehearsed. No live audience, no cold open. Just four somber faces behind the iconic desk, like news anchors reading a tragedy. Whoopi, silent. Joy, defensive. The others, nervous. A brief statement scrolled across the screen. "We are committed to honest discourse. Missteps were made. We aim to learn and do better." But the audience wasn't buying it. Comment sections filled with fury. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a plan. If she hadn't recorded it, you'd still be doing it." Karoline, meanwhile, remained eerily quiet. No new posts, no interviews, no tweets. Just silence. The press begged for a response. Fox News offered prime time. Tucker Carlson's team called. Even CNN, usually critical, asked if she'd sit down for a live panel. She declined them all. Because the next message came not from a reporter, but from inside ABC. Stephen handed her a plain manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a single USB, a sticky note attached. "You need to see this. It wasn't just you." Karoline looked at Stephen. He nodded once. She plugged in the drive, opened the file. Clip after clip. Guests from years past. Conservative authors, military spouses, a Hispanic pastor, a black female entrepreneur who had backed school choice. Each one handled, mocked off camera, cue cards, strategies, off-air laughs. She felt her throat tighten. This wasn't about her. It never had been. This was a pattern. A system that preyed on people who dared to walk into liberal territory with an unapproved opinion. And she had just ripped the veil off it. By Friday, national networks had no choice. The story was everywhere. Newspapers called it the Great Media Backfire. Talk shows debated whether ABC executives should step down. Even comedy shows, the same ones that once mocked Karoline, joked about how The View had become the most unmasked show in America. An emergency meeting at ABC headquarters led to one unavoidable outcome, a full internal review. An executive assistant leaked audio from the meeting. "We either get ahead of this or we lose our audience forever. If we throw talent under the bus, we risk a lawsuit. If we protect them, we risk total brand collapse." Karoline didn't post about the leak. She didn't have to. America was speaking now. A 76-year-old woman from Texas named Mabel uploaded a Facebook video that went viral. "I don't care if you vote blue or red. I care about truth. And what they did to that girl, they've been doing it to people like us for years. Silencing, mocking, editing our words. Well, not anymore." She stood up. "So now we're standing too." A veteran from Ohio began a petition. "We want Karoline Leavitt to testify before Congress on media manipulation." Within 48 hours, the petition had 340,000 signatures. And then it happened. A sitting U.S. senator tweeted, "What K. Leavitt NH exposed isn't just media bias, it's strategic entrapment. We will be launching a formal hearing." Karoline read the tweet, breathed slowly, looked down at her sleeping infant in the bassinet. "Stephen," she said, barely above a whisper, "they want me to testify." He met her gaze. "Then we prepare." That night, for the first time in a week, she spoke, live, unfiltered. "This isn't a victory lap, it's a warning. If they did it to me, they've done it to others. They used the trust of the American people to push a lie, and they dressed it up as entertainment." She paused. But now the cameras are turned around, and it's their turn to answer. The video amassed 11 million views overnight. And across the nation, the conversation had changed. Not just about Karoline, not just about The View, but about every room where voices are scripted, where truth is muffled, and where silence is bought. The U.S. Capitol was unusually still that morning, not because of lack of activity. The building throbbed with reporters, staffers, security, but because of what was coming. Everyone could feel it. The air itself seemed to hum. For the first time in congressional history, a sitting media witness wasn't an executive or a whistleblower from a tech company. It was a 27-year-old mother, conservative firebrand, and former Trump spokesperson who had captured the attention and conviction of a generation. Karoline Leavitt arrived at the hearing room wearing a midnight blue blazer, her silver cross necklace glinting against her skin, and a leather-bound folder tucked firmly under her arm. Her infant son had been dropped off at daycare that morning with a soft kiss on the forehead. "Mommy has to go make something right," she whispered to him. The chamber filled quickly. Members of Congress, former guests who'd appeared on The View, legal analysts, religious leaders, retired school teachers, college students, veterans in caps that read Vietnam or Desert Storm. All eyes turned to the chair in the center. Carolina sat. The microphone buzzed. The committee chair leaned forward. "Miss Leavitt, thank you for being here. You may begin." She opened her folder slowly. "I want to be clear. This isn't about one show. This is about what happens when powerful media institutions create platforms for conversation and then secretly weaponize them against people with dissenting views." She paused, looked each committee member in the eye. "When I sat on The View, I wasn't given a platform. I was given a trap, and I've now presented the receipts that show exactly how that trap was set." Karoline submitted the evidence packet, transcripts, rehearsal footage, timeline analyses, anonymous insider testimony. A Democratic senator raised a hand. "Miss Leavitt, are you alleging that this was a coordinated corporate attack on your beliefs?" Karoline didn't blink. "I'm not alleging, I'm proving." Gasps rippled through the audience. One man in the back clapped, but stopped himself. Another committee member, a moderate independent, spoke. "Miss Leavitt, why didn't you speak out sooner?" Her answer was simple. "Because I didn't come to play victim. I came prepared to reveal a system." That line would air on every major network that night. Outside the hearing room, news vans lined the Capitol Plaza. Inside, the questions deepened. Another senator held up the cue card footage. "Did you have any knowledge of these materials being prepared against you before your appearance?" "None. And I was never told I'd be given equal opportunity to respond. The producers said it would be a civil discussion. They never mentioned the word strategy." An older representative from Texas, a former pastor, leaned into his mic. "Miss Leavitt, you didn't raise your voice once. Not in your posts, not on the Hill, not even when the attacks got personal." He paused. "Why?" Karoline glanced up. The cameras zoomed in. "Because dignity doesn't scream. It stands." The room went still. A long silence. Then another voice from the panel. "We'd like to request this committee submit an official recommendation to open an ethics review of ABC's practices as a broadcast entity." The motion passed. Karoline had done more than testify. She had triggered a government review of media ethics in prime time. The next morning, every paper carried the same image: Karoline, seated alone, holding a pen, the cross necklace shining against the Capitol seal behind her. The headlines? One woman, one folder, one system exposed. Leavitt's calm shatters the media machine. Dignity doesn't scream, it stands. At ABC, the mood was catastrophic. Viewership had plummeted by 42% in a single week. Internal staffers were threatening to walk. Advertisers, especially major brands with family-based audiences, were pulling out. In an emergency broadcast, ABC's CEO appeared on Good Morning America. He read from a prepared statement. "We are launching an independent investigation into the production protocols and editorial decision-making of The View." When asked if talent would be suspended or removed, he only said, "We will hold all responsible parties accountable." It wasn't enough. The public wanted more than accountability. They wanted honesty. Karoline released a short video that afternoon. She stood in front of an American flag. No script, no glamour, just her, the cross, and the Constitution behind her. This wasn't about ratings. This wasn't about me. It was about you, your voice, your trust, your right to speak. And if I had to go through that fire so you don't have to, then it was worth it. The final line punched through the screen. Let this be the last time someone is invited to speak, only to be silenced. Let this be the beginning of something better. The clip went viral, again. And once again, Karoline said no more. She let America speak. 2 weeks after the congressional hearing, the ripple had become a wave. Not just within media circles or Capitol offices, but in homes, schools, churches, and civic groups across the country. Grandparents were forwarding Karoline's testimony to their grandchildren. Faith groups were screening her speech in evening gatherings. Elderly veterans who had once distrusted anyone under 40 now watched her with admiration in their eyes. Because something about Karoline had cracked through the noise. Not her age, not her politics, but her presence. She never yelled, never accused, never veered into theatrics. She stood her ground. Like the truth itself had a backbone, and she had chosen to carry it. Inside ABC, the reckoning intensified. The independent review uncovered not just the playbook used against Karoline, but similar strategies spanning 8 years. Former producers spoke anonymously to the Wall Street Journal. One revealed, "We weren't instructed to have conversations. We were instructed to spark reactions. Conflict got the clicks. They called it constructive friction, but we knew it wasn't constructive." The fallout was swift. Joy Behar quietly announced an extended medical leave. Whoopi Goldberg, under immense internal pressure, released a cryptic video stating, "It's time I listen instead of talk. I'm stepping away." But America wasn't just asking who would replace them. America was asking, what happens now? Karoline didn't gloat. She didn't host a victory rally. Instead, she returned to New Hampshire. She stood before a local high school civics class. No cameras, no press. Just students who had watched her clips on TikTok, now seeing her in person. One girl raised her hand shyly. "What made you brave enough to do it?" Karoline paused, then smiled. "It wasn't bravery," she said. "It was knowing I'd regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't." She looked across the classroom. There's a moment, and it comes for all of us, when someone hands you a script, a role to play. You can read the lines they give you, or you can say, "No, I'll speak in my own voice." That's what I did. She let the words hang in the air. They didn't need applause. Just silence, the kind that meant people were thinking. Meanwhile, in Washington, legislation began moving. Senator Hawley and a bipartisan group introduced the Media Accountability and Ethics in Broadcasting Act, nicknamed Leavitt's Law. Its goal was simple: increase transparency in network editorial practices, ensure disclosure of pre-interview strategies, penalize hidden coordination against political or religious guests under false pretense of neutrality. The bill's introductory hearing opened with a video clip, not of Karoline speaking, but of The View's infamous rehearsal footage. Even skeptical lawmakers sat straighter. One Republican senator whispered to a Democrat beside him, "Whatever your politics, this isn't right." And the Democrat nodded. Karoline's inbox, meanwhile, overflowed. A retired nun from Georgia wrote, "They tried to make you look small, but they didn't realize faith has a way of standing tall." A 78-year-old man from Utah shared, "I was silenced once at a veterans roundtable for questioning healthcare rationing. Watching you brought me peace. I finally feel like someone heard me." Even a former producer from The View sent an anonymous note, "I'm sorry, you were right to hit record." Months later, Karoline was invited to speak at the National Summit on Faith and Free Expression. Held in a packed auditorium in Philadelphia, the event opened with a reverend who quoted scripture. "Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer each person." Then he introduced her. "Tonight, we don't welcome a celebrity. We welcome a citizen who stood not with anger, but with resolve, who fought not to be loud, but to be heard." Karoline stepped onto the stage, holding no notes. Her words echoed through the hall. "I wasn't silenced because I yelled. I was silenced because I didn't." Pause. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means strength, when used wisely. She took a deep breath. "My journey began with a trap, but it ends here, with truth unchained." The crowd stood as one, not cheering like fans, but honoring her like witnesses. Witnesses to a moment in American history when someone didn't just talk about the truth. She stood for it. And that, they knew, would echo far beyond one episode of one show. Back home that night, Karoline sat on the porch. The stars were out. Her baby slept soundly inside. Stephen sent one last message. "You did it." She replied simply, "No, we started it." And with that, she turned her phone face down, closed her eyes, and rested. Because for the first time in months, the fight had shifted, not away from her, but into the hands of millions now awake. And that was the point all along. One voice, unbroken. One truth, undenied. One woman, unshaken, who walked into their stage and rewrote the whole script.